evening or good morning. I'm Takahide Akiyama, President of Japan Society of Northern California. Thank you for joining us today. This week, on March the 11th, 10 years ago, at 4:46 p.m. Japan time, which was 11:46 a.m. March the 10th Pacific time, an incredibly huge earthquake hit Tohoku region of Japan. It was a magnitude of 9.0, the largest recorded in Japan, and it caused triple disaster of earthquake, tsunami, and nuclear accident. Nearly 20,000 people lost their lives. Over 2,500 people are still reported missing. Another nearly 4,000 people have died related to the earthquake and tsunami. Over 470,000 people had to be evacuated. And as of February 2021, just last month, approximately 41 people are still in evacuation. The magnitude of loss and damages was staggering, and the Japanese government budget to recover from damages is about 32 trillion yen, which is about just over $300 billion. So many people were directly impacted, and there are still so many suffering. On behalf of Japan Society of Northern California, I would like to extend our deepest sympathy to those who are impacted and those who are still recovering from the loss and damages. At this time, I would like to ask you, if you would, to join me for a short moment of silence to reflect on the earthquake and tsunami and think of those who lost their lives, and always to remember the tragedy in the years to come. Thank you. We cannot stop earthquakes or natural disasters from happening, but there are things that we can do better prepare for such disasters and try to reduce losses and damages, as well as recovering more quickly. Since the Great East Japan earthquake, there have been much more attention and tremendous efforts have been given to disaster preparedness and mitigation damages, and also to the technical advancement. Today, to commemorate the 10th anniversary, we have asked two experts in this area to discuss how we can better prepare for future natural disasters using technologies, one from Japan and one from the US. Kozo Keikaku Engineering is a leading structural design company listed on Tokyo Stock Exchange with deep experience in disaster preparedness, or Bosai in the Japanese language, for over 60 years. Mr. Shunya Okuno will tell us what KKE has been doing in this area. One concern is a Silicon Valley-based and relatively young company, but rapidly growing, offering a new approach using next-generation AI and machine learning to predict impact from natural disaster and climate change as well. They are already doing business in Japan as an international corporation. Mr. Ahmed Wani, co-founder and CEO, will share his passion and his strategy in the disaster preparedness using AIs. We have Albert Chu as a moderator for the discussions. He is a CEO of Sompo Digital Lab in Silicon Valley, and in addition, he will be taking an important role of Chief Digital Officer of Sompo Holdings of Japan from April 1 this year. Congratulations, Albert, on your new role. He will introduce the two speakers later on. I hope you enjoyed the discussions and learned something from them. Before we begin today's discussions, we have a special message from Ms. Mami Mizutani, Special Representative of the Secretary General for Disaster Risk Reduction and the head of the United Nations Office of Disaster Risk Reduction based in Geneva, Switzerland. Previously, she served the Japanese Ministry of Foreign Affairs in various senior positions. We are so grateful to her taking time to prepare this special message for us on this important occasion. Thank you, Ms. Tani-san. Here's her message.
Dear members of the Japan Society of Northern California, I would like to say how pleased I am to be invited to say a few words at this event, which is an outstanding example of international cooperation across the Pacific Ocean, home to around 80% of the world's seismic activity and much of its extreme weather. This event is a fitting way to mark the 10th anniversary of the Great East Japan earthquake and tsunami, which became the most costly disaster in history before the current COVID-19 pandemic. Nothing undermines sustainable development like a disaster. Your focus today on the role that technology can play in prevention and mitigation is recognition that actually there is no such thing as a natural disaster. The drivers of disaster risk are human-induced, such as climate change, inequality, poor land use, failure to implement building codes, destruction of protective ecosystems, and much more. The solutions can also be human-induced. Technology has a major role to play in predicting where and when natural and human-induced hazards will strike us, and what can be done before that to prevent or mitigate any ensuing disaster event. Over the past 10 years, great advances have been made in the way that technology has been deployed to support disaster scenario planning and to build back better after a disaster. Technological innovation, for example, is key to advances in reliable early warning systems and understanding seismic risk in all its complexity. The challenge is to ensure that those advances in areas such as AI and machine learning serve the greater good and are made affordable and accessible to all. I am encouraged to see young entrepreneurs making resilience into a commodity, and I'm sure that your endeavor will also feed into activities to support improved international cooperation for developing countries, including technology transfer, which is a key target of the Sendai Framework for Disaster Risk Reduction, the global plan to reduce disaster losses adopted in 2015. I'm excited by your dedication to this theme and to see the private sector playing a crucial role in disaster risk reduction because risk is everybody's business. I wish you well and look forward to hearing more about your progress in this important and urgent area. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much, Ms. Tori-san of the United Nations Office for Disaster Risk Reduction for your very inspiring message and your call to action for entrepreneurship and collaboration between the public and private sectors. And I think in today's panel, we will hear exactly that. And I think we have, while remembering at the same time the March 11th event, we have lots of hope. And I hope that our panel today will be able to demonstrate that. Also want to thank you, Akiyama-san, and the Japan Society of Northern California for hosting this amazing innovation panel in remembrance of the 10th anniversary of the Great East Japan earthquake of March 11th, 2011. My name is Albert Chu. I am the CEO of Sompo Digital Lab, as Akiyama-san had mentioned before. Sompo Digital Lab is the innovation arm for Sompo based here in Silicon Valley. And I'm most honored to moderate this session today with two very distinguished panel members, Okuno-san from Kozo Keikaku Engineering, or KKE, and Ahmad-san from One Concern. And before I introduce my panel, I want to just add my thoughts and prayers and say a few words on the occasions of this 10th anniversary of the Great East Japan earthquake. March 11th, 2011 was an extremely memorable and emotional day for everyone at Sampo. Of course, our thoughts and prayers are to all of those affected by this horrendous natural catastrophe and their loved ones. And most importantly, let's remember and honor them by investing in creating a more resilient society to really reduce future or mitigate future natural disasters. And as the Digital Innovation Center here in Silicon Valley, Sampo Digital Lab is committed to harnessing technology and innovation to mitigate the effects of natural disasters and to create a more resilient Japan and hopefully globally a more resilient planet. So with that said, it is my honor to first introduce Shunya Okuno from Kozo Keikaku Engineering, who is joining us today from Japan. Okuno-san is an expert on earthquake and tsunami simulation and forecasting. As section manager of KKE's weather disaster prevention, Okuno-san launched a real-time flood forecasting service called Rivercast. His research and forecast models have been published in the journal Nature, and he's well recognized as a professional in this field. Okuno-san is a graduate from the University of Tokyo, is a member of the Japan Association for Earthquake Engineering's Tsunami Load Committee, and he has been with KKE since 2012. Please join me in welcoming Okuno-san and hearing his presentation today. So, Okuno-san.
Thank you for your introduction, and I will share my presentation material. So could you wait a second? Okay, I'm ready. First, thank you for the opportunity to make this presentation today. I'm Shunya. I'm Shunya Okuno, an engineer of KKE, Kozo Keikaku Engineering. And I guess it is unnecessary information, but I'm a magician as well. And actually, I've never in the US, but the place I'd most like to visit is Magic Castle in California. So after COVID-19, so please take me too. So anyway, this is introduction of our company, KKE. Well, we have a philosophy to bridge academia and industrial worlds. Therefore, the collaboration with academia is always welcome. In addition, also KKE is almost 60 years company, but we keep trying to start up new business by new technologies. For example, this is my work, collaborated with the University of Tokyo. We have developed a technology to forecast river water level based on nonlinear science. And as you can see, the key technology is press released from the University of Tokyo and have published by a Nature Research Journal. And now we are starting a new business using this. So this is our business domains. We are the first company to design structures by computers in Japan. And we are also known that we restored Kumamoto Castle in 1960. After that, we have applied the computer technology to various fields, not only construction, but also society, say decision-making or evaluating social networks and so on. And say nature, including floods or tsunami simulation and something like that. So today, I will introduce how we use those technologies to increase disaster resilience. We have many lessons from the Great East Earthquake, 311, which Japanese usually say 311. But in this presentation, we picked three topics. The first one is about limitation of structural measures. The second one is about communication blackout. The last one is about widespread damage. So let's talk about the first topic. After 311, two levels have been set to discuss natural disasters. One is called level 1, which is expected to occur once in 100 years. The second level is level 2, which is expected to occur once in 1,000 years. So structures should be designed, including seawall, should be designed to prevent level 1 disasters, but it is not realistic to prevent level 2 disasters by structures alone. So to increase resilience to disaster, non-structural measures are also required and very important. And this is one of our technologies of non-structural measures. Here, we combined two technologies. One is tsunami numerical simulation, and the other is called multi-agent simulation, which can simulate human behavior, including this kind of evacuation. And this movie is the simulation result of Kamakura City in Japan. So in this movie, white marker represents evacuation by walk, and blue marker represents by car and by bike. And I guess it is difficult to figure out, but these small dots represent each evacuee, and this covered area represents inundation of tsunami. So through this technology, we can discuss optimal methods for evacuation, so combining those evacuation methods. And we also prepared some other slides for non-structural measures for evacuation, but we do not explain the detail due to time constraints. For example, this is SNet, C for observation network for earthquakes and tsunamis. So thanks to SNet, we can get earthquake warning by 30 seconds faster than before. And tsunami can be detected by 20 minutes faster than before. So we can also introduce two other technologies. One is about structural health monitoring, and the other is about tsunami evacuation building and the simulation for that. So if you are interested in, we will explain the detail later. So please say so. Right. So let's go on to the second lesson. It's about communication blackout. So this figure represents the status of network blackout in Miyagi Prefecture 2 days after 311. So this gray area represents a landline blackout, and this red area represents cellular blackout. So due to the blackout, the government cannot correct damage information, and the aftermath gets worse and longer. So this is one of our solution to communication blackout, which is combination of QAMP and relay by smartphone. And QAMP is not our solution, but a project of Cabinet Office, which uses satellite system Michibiki. Do you know that? Michibiki. And QAMP collects information of each evacuation shelter. Actually, there are multiple shelters. And collect information via Michibiki to disaster organization. However, it cannot collect information from outside of shelter like this. On the other hand, our service, Relay by Smartphone, can build an ad hoc network by using only smartphones without any base station. So all we need to do is installing the application. So to combine those technologies, the government or a disaster organization can collect information of those end users. And actually, this Relay by Smartphone system is now used in Kozo City, in Japan, Kozo City. And these figures represent a disaster drill in Kozo City by using the application. So let's move on to the last topic, which is about widespread damage. So because of that, it directly delays business recovery, especially for supply chain. So we also support business continuity planning, BCP, using a numerical simulation like this movie. So this is just a case study, but we have other solutions to that. Right. So finally, I'd like to end my presentation by this slide. In short, we believe the possibility of technologies. Even after 311, we do not think that the nature is enemy. We can use technologies and engineering to increase disaster resilience to coexist with nature. And that's all of my presentation. But today, my colleagues, Hashimoto-san and Saijo-san, are also participating in this event. So they are professionals of earthquake engineering. So I hope we can discuss with them. Thank you for listening. That's all.
Hey, thank you very much, Okuno-san. Yes. And we welcome any questions for Okuno-san, Hashimoto-san, and Saijo-san later in the Q&A session. What I think we will do now is ask Ahmad Wani, who is CEO and co-founder of One Concern, who's our next panel speaker, to join us. It is my honor to introduce Ahmad. He started One Concern, which is a Silicon Valley-based company that delivers a resilience as a service solution that brings together disaster science with artificial intelligence and machine learning for better decision-making. Ahmad is a native of Kashmir, South Asia, and he has a personal story. He survived a major disaster that has impacted his family and community. And through that, he realized the inadequacy of traditional disaster solutions. So he reshaped his graduate research work at Stanford. He was still a graduate student at Stanford at that time, to harness the power of AI to revolutionize the world's understanding of natural phenomena science and quantify resilience so that communities can be better prepared before and after disaster strikes. So this resulted in establishing One Concern, which, for full disclosure, has also received investment from Sompo. Ahmad holds a graduate degree in structural engineering with a focus on seismic engineering from Stanford University. Ahmad-san was named by Forbes magazine as one of the world's top innovators in its 30 Under 30 edition in 2016. So please join me in welcoming Ahmad and hearing his presentation.
Thank you, Albert, and thank you so much, everyone, for having me, especially and everybody from the Japan Society. It is truly an honor for me to be able to come here and talk about One Concern. So I guess without further ado, I'll just share my screen. So please confirm if you can see it. Great, awesome. I was asked to give a little bit of a background of One Concern and how we got started, and then go deeper into what we really do. So One Concern's mission is simple but extremely important and difficult, which is trying to make disasters less disastrous. I was very lucky to meet my co-founder Nicole, who was also a co-collaborator in this research at Stanford with me. And we happened to arrive at this idea. So I'm an entrepreneur by complete accident, and did not initially plan to start a company. Instead, this was going to be my PhD project. As Albert mentioned, as I was trying to get my master's at PhD in Stanford, my mom had called me back home to get engaged. And the day I reached Kashmir, this is August of 2014. The very next morning there was a big flood, and essentially within a few minutes we could almost 85% of the city was underwater. So I'm talking about millions of people, we spent almost more than 6 days on either the second floor or on the roof of our house, not knowing whether we would survive or not. And in fact, telling this story, actually, if some Kashmiri would be hearing it, they would think that, oh, this person was actually at the safest location, because we were very lucky. Our home stood the flood, but we were seeing around and we were seeing people floating in the water because their homes were starting to collapse. And so it was an eye-opening event, because I started to wonder, we're spending so much money back in Silicon Valley in trying to make the thinnest iPad even more thin, but maybe we could use some of that technology to be able to, we just lost 400 people here. So maybe we could use that technology to potentially give us a heads up, and we could have evacuated. So we ended up starting this as a research project at Stanford, and then ultimately took it forward as a company. And a big part of our initial research was primarily focused on POCs in the West Coast of the United States. So many of the local governments, Seattle being one of the key examples, continues to use One Concern in multiple of its government departments. And the focus there was primarily, responding to disasters, during that event, as well as helping them plan before the event. Now, the fundamental hypotheses which me and Nicole and some of the other professors had while starting the company was that, since like signal processing in the 90s, if you remember, was very dated. If you used to call somebody, there was a lot of noise on the other end. To simplify this, and that was because there was a lot of uncertainty in our signal processing models. They were based on pure statistical analysis, and in the last 20 to 30 years, we have now sort of gone all the way full on digital. And so every time you call somebody, the signal adapts itself, and it clarifies the voice, and therefore you are now able to have that clear signal. But the way we understand natural disasters, in our opinion, hadn't really gone through that digital transformation or that shift, even though now we have access to more data than ever before. We understand our built environment or our natural environment much better. And so that was the hypotheses with which we started. And due to cloud and due to cloud being cheaper, we thought that we could potentially harness the power of AI to be able to aggregate all of that data, combine it with what we already know about some of these natural disasters and how they behave, whether it's earthquakes or whether it's floods and hurricanes or typhoons. So a big difference in One Concern's approach from other technologies is the way we sort of simulate natural disasters. So think about, and let's say there's a big hurricane, for example, in Florida or in Japan. You open the newspaper and you see like a picture, and certain buildings or certain areas are blue, certain areas are red, and you paint them based on how they were impacted differently. And usually our first responders or city planners, they use what we are called GIS systems, or geographic information systems, to map that impact. What we started to realize was that, well, we could definitely use those two-dimensional systems to map the impact, but actually the impact is not two-dimensional. To Okuno-san's point, right, which he actually repeatedly made in the last presentation, there is a lot of ripple effects which happen, which cause humongous amounts of disruption. I'm right now in the Bay Area, and if there is a big earthquake in the Bay Area, homes getting damaged would not be the biggest concern, maybe, right? Depending upon the earthquake, we could actually see the water system coming from the HHE Dam causing, being disrupted in a big way, crippling some of the critical hospitals. So what we started to realize was that we need to almost create an AutoCAD model of the world, or of a city, starting with a city. So we started to do that for the city of Seattle. And this, which I have in the presentation, is actually a part of the city of Memphis, where we are trying to, in the bottom right, we are trying to see the impact to the office building, which is actually not very, very badly damaged, considering this is an 8 magnitude earthquake. And by the way, this region did experience more than an 8 magnitude almost 100 years back. So this definitely has the possibility to have a very large earthquake. But as you can see, all the other boxes, except for those ones in the bottom right, are significantly damaged. Basically, if you're an office building, or if you're the airport might not be that damaged, but all the roads leading to the airport, the water pipes, the power lines, will be damaged much sooner. And that is what we see in our physical infrastructure in the US or even in other countries, where these public infrastructure systems are going to give up much sooner. And so one concerns, technology is really focused on creating that digital twin of all the water pipes, mapping out all the power lines, all the road networks and bridges, so that we can ultimately create almost like a graph database of the world. And then we can overlay any disaster, whether it's an earthquake, whether it's a flood, and use those hazard models to be able to not just see the direct impact, but the ripple effects, and be able to mitigate them. One of our investors early on in our Series A was Ambassador Roos, who was the U.S. ambassador to Japan under President Obama's 2009 to 2013. And because of his invitation, we went to Japan and we were presenting at the Geodesic Forum. And that is where we met Sampo and other interested companies and governments who could potentially derive benefit and were interested in this system. And so we, in partnership with Sampo, were able to launch our first pilot, which is in the Kumamoto city in Japan. And these are some of the pictures of that. And broadly, really what the system does is, let's say, for example, if there's a big typhoon, or if there's a big, and I'll give you an example of Hurricane Harvey, which happened in 2017 in Houston, Texas. Basically, what we saw was, these days weather prediction is getting better and better. So we were pretty sure that the city is going to get more than 42 inches of rainfall, something which is record-setting in a 12-hour period. But if we pulled up the FEMA risk map, which is mapped to a particular level of rainfall, we were expecting millions of people to be flooded. And ultimately, the city did not evacuate because they thought it would actually backfire if they evacuated so many people. And so ultimately 60 people lost their lives because, the water went over their head and their homes were inundated. Actually, in the first 24 hours, only 30,000 people got the flooding. And once we ran our models, we started realizing that we were predicting 33,000 people will only have the flooding because we were taking the live data into account instead of it being a static map. And out of the 33,000, 29,000 matched the actual 30,000. So that is, it's of course not 100% correct. It may have a varying accuracy based on the event, but if we have a continuously adaptive system, we can, do our level best to be able to give this system or this data to the first responders, to the decision makers, so that they can make informed decisions of who needs to be evacuated. This is a small, a walkthrough of our live product in Kumamoto. As you can see, this is the Kumamoto city. And so there's a timeline bar at the bottom. So you can keep dragging it into the future and you can see the entire city, or you can zoom in at a particular location and you can see with the time the floodwaters going up, and then it recedes, and then actually it comes back up again. So you are able to now sort of understand how the floods are going to affect certain regions. And of course, with more and more data, the system gets better. So every 15 to 30 minutes, we get better data from the river gauge. We get better data from satellite imagery, as well as better data from the update from the weather, and it updates the system. So in collaboration with our partner in Japan, Sompo, we are planning to expand systems like these and the ones you saw previously to help build resilience in Japan. So I will stop here. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much, Ahmed, for sharing your presentation and your thoughts with us. Before I open up for Q&A, a couple things. One is please type in the chat box any questions you may have for Kuno-san and for Ahmed-san, and we will try to get to as many of them as possible. And while you're doing that, I'd like to recognize that we have actually some very special guests online today with us here. We have Chris Howard, who is the Chair Supervisor Council of the Crescent City Council, who is joining us, as well as Blake Inscore, who is the Mayor of Crescent City, if I'm not mistaken. I'd like to recognize them. And maybe either Blake or Chris, you can tell us a little bit about your sister city relationship with Rikuzen Takada, and also what happened during March 11th, during the tsunami in Crescent City. And so may I turn the floor over to, I don't know, either one of you. So whoever wants to unmute. Okay, Chris. Blake, please.
Yes, thank you. It is an honor to be here. We have a unique relationship with our sister city in Rikuzen Takada. 10 years ago this week, the tsunami that occurred after the Great East Japan earthquake obviously had a devastating impact in Japan, but it also reached Crescent City. It destroyed, for all practical purposes, our harbor, which resulted in a $50 million rebuild of our harbor. And while that was a significant event, it did not connect us to our new friends in Japan. That wouldn't happen for 2 years when a small fishing boat washed up on our shore in April of 2013. And it was discovered that it had belonged to Takada High School, and through involvement of community leaders and specifically students from Del Norte High School. The boat was returned to Rikuzen Takeda, and a relationship began to form. And here we are today, having close relationships. I personally have had the opportunity to travel to Rikuzen Takeda 4 times. Mr. Howard has been there 3 times. We have seen all kinds of unique storylines, business opportunities, student exchanges. I know I'm supposed to just give you a few minutes. I could talk for the rest of your time about how important it is to do a person-to-person, citizen-to-citizen public diplomacy, and one of the most important things that is pertinent to this discussion is the collaboration that we have been able to bring together in disaster preparedness has been absolutely crucial. We were able to bring Cal OES into the discussion, and we have disaster preparedness in the state of California is different today because of the relationship that has been built. And while I don't want to take credit for that, because clearly there was some kind of destiny that brought our 2 communities together, but the people in the United States, and specifically in the state of California, are safer today because of our students trying to do an extraordinary act of kindness. And out of that extraordinary act of kindness, we have addressed disaster preparedness in a way that we would have never done so without that. And so it's just an honor to be here and to hear these encouraging opportunities to continue to grow and learn and collaborate. But I just want to remind everyone that don't ever overlook the small opportunities, because it is in the small opportunities in life that some of the most profound things come. And we have seen that to the point where NBC created a documentary about our story. If you have not seen it, go to Peacock, their streaming platform, type in Kamome, and you will get to see the opportunity of just how powerful this story is. And the future is still before us. And so it is an honor for me to consider Mayor Toba from Rikuzen Takeda a personal friend. And we have a common desire to build a better world for our children and for our children's children. And to be able to do that, we need discussions just like this so that we can provide the kind of assurance of disaster preparedness for the next generation. So thank you so much for allowing us to join you today.
Thank you so much for these just so inspiring and beautiful words, and so eloquently stated. And thank you very much. And I think I speak for everyone in the audience, how I, in this, with this expression, in every cloud storm, there's a silver lining. In every tsunami, there's also a silver boat here. That you
I like it.
So thank you very much. And to the audience, if anyone has questions for Blake or Chris, please put them in the chat. So once again, thank you, Blake, and thank you, Chris, for joining us today. So now I think we can move on. We'll open up to the Q&A. Prior to doing that, I'd like to quickly introduce Matt Stevens. Matt is available for Japanese language interpretation. So if you have any questions that you have in English, he will be able to interpret it for our Japanese speakers if they have questions on that, and vice versa. So please, we'd like this to make it as easy and as bilingual as possible. With that said, we already have quite a few questions. So if I'll start off with this first one here, it is to both Okuno-san and to Ahmed. So in the presentations, we have heard a lot about the technological innovation that has taken place in companies like KKE and One Concern to make disasters less disastrous. Unfortunately, we know that major earthquakes will happen again, and climate change is fueling increasingly severe floods. So the question is, what can we be doing now to help increase resilience in cities like San Francisco or Tokyo or Osaka or in any city in the world, so that when the next big disaster hits, the disruption to society, the economy, and people's lives will be less severe. Okuno-san or Ahmad, would you like to? Yeah, please.
Okay. Thank you for profound question. So as I mentioned in my presentation, there are mainly two approaches to enhance disaster resilience. One is structural and the other is non-structural. So regarding a structural measure, maybe a government can proceed it, but regarding non-structural measures, each local government and a private company can contribute it. So what we can do is, for each private company, we can develop more, say, familiar or useful technologies for those local governments.
Yes.
Thank you, Okuno-san, and thank you, Albert, for the question. I think that we often use this phrase "inside of one concern," but it seems like every time there is a disaster, it's almost like a surprise, and we are always like, "Oh my God, we didn't realize that this happened or this could happen," and we have, the world has suffered so much because of that. So I feel like the first thing is to be able to do a deep analysis of your vulnerabilities or your risks. Once we understand where those key blind spots are in a city or like Tokyo, then we can figure out the mitigative aspects of what can be done. But it first starts with building resilience. With understanding the blind spots, and in understanding blind spots, it's really important that we don't over-index on the last earthquake, because the probability of Fukushima, Great East Japan earthquake, or Loma Prieta earthquake in San Francisco again happening is basically zero. It won't happen. Something else will happen, which will potentially affect us in slightly different ways, or maybe drastically different ways. And so it's really important that, and climate change is not making things easier. It's continuously changing the hazard. And of course, cities are growing and expanding like anything. And so we are dealing with a continuously changing system. And so in this system, so it's almost like we are driving on the freeway in the express lane, and we don't need to be looking backwards only. Of course, these are the moments where we can actually introspect and check where we are, but we need to look in the front mirror. Like we can't be looking in the rear view and driving at full speed. So understanding future risks as they present themselves in the next 10 to 20 years is extremely critical.
Mm-hmm. Great. Yeah, wise words. Thank you. We have another question actually from an audience member who I would like to invite up, if you wouldn't mind, Michael Fletcher, to ask your question directly to Okuno-san, I believe. Mm-hmm. Michael, are you?
Yeah.
Yeah, hi.
I am here. Yeah, thank you. Okuno-san mentioned QZSS Mitsubishi system, which was designed for global positioning, of course, and communication is being critical. And I know JAXA has been working with on the DNet system for coordination mostly. And I just wonder about the communication through airborne options as far as either UAS or some sort of mobile platform, because I think that I'm not sure, will the network traffic actually be supported on QZSS? So I just wonder if either one of you can comment on that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for your question. Today, fortunately, one of developer of Smaho Relay, Inoshita-san, is participating in this event. I found him. So, Inoshita-san, could you answer his very valuable question?
My name is Takahito Inoshita from Kozo Keikaku Engineering, a colleague of Okuno-san, but working in the different department, which is the telecommunication engineering department, including relay by smartphone. Okuno-san just introduced today. So let me talk a little bit about relay by smartphone, Smaho de relay. So I think the most important role of relay by smartphone is making redundancy. More ways to communicate with others, even in the emergency situation, like cell phone networks blackout. I think, but relay by smartphone provide only literally relay networks, so very limited local network. So relay by smartphone needs more ways to communicate with others. Somebody talk about QZSS, quasi satellite system. I think that is one of just one way to expand the capability of relay by smartphone. So I think we need to find more ways, other communications to expand relay by smartphone. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. Next question, I'd like to, another audience member, I'd like to recognize Larry Greenwood. He was the former president, I think, of Japan Society of Northern California. Welcome. Thank you for joining. And I understand you have a question about big data, and maybe we can first start off with having Ahmad answer that question.
Yeah, it's a pretty general question, but how obviously you're bringing a lot of data into this analysis, the simulations, and my question was, how easy is it to get access to that information? How much of it is there? How much are there privacy issues? Are there issues that local governments or maybe even the central government wouldn't want to share, particularly with a private company doing this kind of work? So I'm just wondering what kinds of challenges you face in getting the big data needed to do your simulations. Thank you.
Thank you, Larry. This is actually, you basically struck the core, right? This is the kind of one of the biggest challenges we face in terms of being able to scale. If you think about the problem more broadly, and I can then discuss sort of Japan specifically, but most cities don't know exactly where their water pipes are and where their power lines are, and they haven't mapped that because those things were laid before software was created or before maps were really put together and digitized. So even some of the more larger cities in the US or globally, they don't know those things. So a big part of actually using a combination of urban systems modeling and AI is to be able to actually create synthetic networks where you are able to actually guess almost where could the water pipes be. And think about, let's say, Silicon Valley. If you know where it's raining, let's say in one of the storms in 2005, and where it actually flooded, you can almost back calculate, oh, maybe the storm water drains are basically this way. You do the same thing for power networks, where you see storms, and then you basically do a diff on yesterday's storm, nighttime satellite image. So you're like, okay, these people have lost power, and then you try to basically predict it for the rest of the cities. Now, at some point, you need to actually validate it from real data. And that is where you need actual data from these cities so that you can calculate the uncertainty in your models. And that is a big challenge in Japan. It's not as big a challenge in the US because in the US, public infrastructure data, whether it's a good thing or a bad thing, is publicly available. So we've been able to sort of obtain data for almost 70 cities for their water systems. So we can basically almost quantify once we go to a new city based on certain characteristics when the city was built. Hey, you know, in terms of predicting the age of the water system, we are this much accurate. In terms of predicting the exact location, we are this much accurate. So, and then of course, those accuracies or inaccuracies have consequences in terms of the customer decision or the actual decision which we're making. So we are able to see that. Now in Japan, you know, the problem is that most of the data sharing and privacy laws are not written in black and white. And so most cities, especially local governments, basically have their own laws where they're like, you know, all these things fall in PII. And, you know, and that creates a big hurdle because then, you know, once you obtain that data, you are compelled, legally required to obfuscate it, or you receive it in obfuscated form. It's not able to generate enough accuracy, or it's not able to create enough validations. So, so we've now tried to go deep with certain local governments where we could potentially maybe convince them, and we have tried it with Kumamoto, for example, in a few cities, but that basically has taken almost years, more than a year, to basically go back and forth with the city attorneys. So I think the best thing would be for the central government in Japan to be able to sort of write more data privacy laws. And there are other models which kind of tangentially touch this, like GDPR, which could prove to be extremely helpful if the Japanese government adopts things around those lines. That would really accelerate this whole thing, because most of the cities have some sort of data, but they're not even open. It's not openly accessible because of those sharing laws. And blockchain definitely presents opportunities where they could be shared without actually, you know, compromising the security. So those are some of the innovations definitely could potentially help.
Thank you, Ahmad. It seems like Larry, he addressed your your question here. We have time for just a couple more questions. I have one here from Tajima-san. Tajima-san, if I may have you come on and ask your question. I think it's mostly for Okuno-san. Yes.
Yes. Actually, my name is Fumiko Tajima. I'm a retired seismologist. And 1 year after the earthquake occurred, Tohoku earthquake occurred, I assembled preliminary research papers on the earthquake and compared the characterization prior to the earthquake and the actual characteristics. Anyway, my question to Okuno-san is, well, your evacuation simulation from tsunami was very interesting. But does your company consult or advise local government during the reconstruction or reconstruction process in terms of determining locations for evacuation safety?
Thank you for your question. And the answer is yes. But I think Hashimoto-san, he is my colleague, is more suitable to answer your question. So, Matto-san, could you translate her question?
Sure. 今の質問は、 その災害が今度起きたときにですね、人がどこに避難すべきかということに対して、その自治体などにですね、そのコンサルをしたりとか、その避難場所をその判断するためのそのアドバイスのようなこともやってるんでしょうか？シミュレーションをやるだけではなくて。
Meet you. My name is Mitsufumi Hashimoto, colleague of Okuno-san. And thank you for your questions. And for evacuation simulations, we may consult with the local governments regarding the establishment of evacuation shelters.
I understand that portion, but also I would like to know if you have any influence when the residents determine to go back to their previous places. I mean, if they go back to their previous locations, they may suffer the same disasters. That's so. Actually, some time ago, I read an article that when the government showed hazard map to the residents, they are very angry because the government caused unnecessary anxieties. It's not true. First, the scientists, engineers, or government have to be able to show the fact for potential disaster. And then they should communicate how to resolve the issues. But when the local government determined to, or local government or residents determine locations to reconstruct the city or so. But I wonder if they consider the issues, if the residents can evacuate within a time frame of tsunami attack from the locations. We can simulate, we can estimate how many minutes they do have, but I wonder if they are aware of the fact.
じゃあ一応訳しますね、簡単に。人々がまた元に住んでいたところに戻る時にですね、政府などハザードマップを出して、危険性っていうのを表してますけれども、本当に事実関係が全部把握されているのか、例えば元の場所に戻っても、その津波が起きてから何分ぐらいに避難することができれば、安全かもしれませんし、すごくその辺の事実を、行政に今提供したりしているのかということだと思うんですけれども、あとその辺のことが把握されていて、元のところに戻るのが安全かどうかという確認するお手伝いなどをしているのか、それは可能なのかというような質問だと思います。
Right. So
yes, so the question has to do with people returning to the place where they were prior to the disaster, and do the residents have all the facts? The government does create a hazard map, which can be useful, but it could also label a region, making it seemingly overly dangerous. So, are people informed about the time that it takes to evacuate? For example, if there's another tsunami that comes, if they can evacuate within a certain amount of time, maybe it's not as risky. Maybe they can still live there if they wish. So how informed are residents, how informed are the residents to make those kinds of decisions, whether to go back or not?
ちょっと政策の方の話にもかなり踏み込んだ内容のご質問かなと思ったので、ちょっとなかなか我々一企業で回答するのは難しい部分がございますと。で、ただ一方で最近自治体さんなんかのニュースだとかを見てますと、やっぱりそういったハザードの、危険なところに極力住まわせないような努力をしようというような方策に転じているかなというふうには見受けられますと。で、その中で、今田島様がおっしゃられたように、いかにこそこの住民の方に情報を伝えるかどうかっていうのが、昔からも言われていることだったんでしょうけども、そこがその伝え方、いかに納得してもらえるように伝えるかっていったところが、永遠の課題みたいな形で、常にそこが、大きな災害が起きるたびに、どうしようという話になっているのかなと思ってます。 で、やっぱりそうは言っても、ちゃんと説明して、その極力ハザードの高いエリアに住まわないようにしようという動きは、でも、その後はちゃんと着々と進んでるかなという印象もありますので、今はまさにこの説明を尽くしている最中なのかなというふうな理解でおります。ちょっとこの程度の回答にしかできませんけれども。
So my answer would be rather general because the question you ask is more related to public policy rather than something an individual company can decide. But I think there is an effort on the local government's part and the government's part to discourage from people going back and living in very hazardous areas. But we have to be able to explain it in a way that they can really understand and take it in. And every time there's a disaster, it's a challenge that we kind of go through again and again. But I think the movement is to discourage people from moving back to very hazardous areas. And I think we're seeing some progress in that regard.
Thank you. I think we have now only time for one final question, and I have the question here. And I think it relates well to this last question that Tajima-san had mentioned, because we've been talking a lot about governments, and obviously disasters happen to entire societies and the complex economic systems that they rely upon. The question then is, how can businesses and financial systems better prepare for a world of worsening disasters to make a society more resilient? And maybe with that, you can also think about some final words of wisdom that you may have, words of hope, I hope, for how to create a more resilient society for all of us. So in closing, may I ask Ahmed-san to start and then followed by Okuno-san.
Thank you, Albert. And I think this is a very critical and I guess fundamental question, right? Because I don't think that to actually Tajima-san's point, which is basically saying, right, like not only do people understand the risk, they were already hit by the disaster, but they still continue to go back, right? So it's definitely something beyond just discovering of risk or getting people to know about their risk, which has to be done in terms of building towards resilience or making disasters less disastrous. And so I don't think technology alone is the solution. I think technology can be a part of the solution. I think it requires a combination of technology, policy, and financial mechanisms. And disasters don't know any borders, city borders, county borders, or country. So I feel like it has to be done ultimately in a public-private partnership type mechanism. So being able to ultimately show how there is a business model to fill the world's resilience deficit is ultimately which would create a win-win situation. Simple example could be Houston in Texas. They've had in the last 8 years 3 500-year events, right? So if you ask somebody right now what is a 500-year event, they probably think that they happen every 500 years, or something like that. But they've had 3 within the last decade, and many smaller events. In fact, again, to Tajima-san's point, people go and reconstruct their home again and again and again at the same place. And do you know who pays for it? The taxpayer pays for it, because the current insurance policy, the National Flood Insurance Policy, incentivizes that behavior, because it's not financially, it's not priced properly. It's a so if one of the ways to do that would be to price the risk properly, so that then people can make those right decisions. And ultimately, I don't think that local governments or governments alone can foot the bill in terms of building a resilient society. We need to be able to show how Stanford and Facebook and Google will be benefited if the Bay Area as a community is more resilient, if all its bridges and water systems are more resilient. And being able to show that is the first step. Coming up with the policy mechanisms and the financial solutions is what will help us get started on this journey.
Thank you, Ahmed. Okuno-san, please, your thoughts.
Okay, thank you for your very profound question. And I think what is important is how we do make disaster resilience business and culture. And from now on, I will be Matt-san, great interpreter, and I will talk in Japanese.
Thanks.
So, 日本語で失礼しますけど、やっぱり防災というのをいかにこの当たり前のものにするか、その文化にするかっていうのが非常に重要だと考えています。で、ですね、やっぱり防災そのものにこうちゃんと価値を見出してもらえれば、その防災というのがビジネスになるんですよね。ビジネスとして成立します。で、そうすると、やっぱり皆さん価値を見出すので、企業もそれを良くしようとモチベートされますし、自治体なんかもそれにお金を出して当たり前という世界が成立するようになるわけです。なので、いかに防災っていうのを価値あるものとして社会に根付かせるのかっていうのが、すごい重要だと私は感じました。それが最終的には、その財政という面でも助かるでしょうし、最終的にはレジリエンスという観点からでも、皆さんのためになるというふうに思います。
Well, I think the most important thing is to have disaster prevention and mitigation to become part of the culture. And I think that can happen once we see the value in disaster mitigation. And if there's value, then you can build a business around it. And once companies see a value, they will be motivated to take steps to improve resilience. And the governments as well will just think of providing funds for building resilience, just part of what they do, as a matter of fact, sort of thing. So finding that value and sharing that value and building on that and building businesses around it, I think is going to benefit everyone. And that's what I wish that we'll be seeing in the future.
Thank you very much, Okuno-san. I think you're absolutely right. Disaster mitigation has to be part of a resilient mindset that we should all have. And also, Ahmad, you mentioned disasters know no borders. And that was it's not only true, it was proven true by our guests today from Crescent City, from Chris and Blake, who couldn't have been more real in explaining how there are really no borders. So we really appreciate you, Okuno-san, Hashimoto-san, Saijo-san from KKE today for sharing your wisdom. Of course, Ahmed and your team at One Concern for doing all the great stuff that you do. And we are very hopeful because of the work that KKE and One Concern is doing. And Matt, thank you very much for your great translation and interpretation. And most importantly, thank you very much to Japan Society of Northern California.